I'm not gonna treat you like those other pots. I'm gonna treat you special. Hello, you dirty potters. How are you today? Today, I'm going to show you another way to use wax resist. If you don't know what wax resist is, this is what wax resist is. But if you want to see an episode on how to actually use wax resist, I've already done one quite some time ago. It's right here, and I will also link it down below for you. But if you simply don't have time to learn what that is right now, because yes you do, I know you're lying, it's 2020, we're all inside with extra time. It's a substance that pretty much does exactly what you think it does. See this little bit right here? This, if you can kind of tell the difference in clay body, is wax resisted already with a paintbrush. This will resist any glaze, or actually anything I put on it. If I decide to coat this in water right here, the water would just drip off. Wax resist is a wax that resists anything you put on top of it. And for potters, that's usually glaze. This comes in handy whenever we're waxing our bottoms if we're dip potters. Potters that will usually take something by the tongs and dip the entire thing in a giant vat of glaze. When they bring it back out, your bottoms are already kind of clean, which reduces a lot of the work, as I said in the previous video about wax resist. But in this video, I'm going to show you guys how to do another trick with it. Today, I'm going to show you potters how to separate glaze with wax resist, but there's a couple of things we're going to need before we start. The first thing you're going to need, of course, is a bottle of wax resist. It's really easy to find. There's no special distributor that makes them or anything. Amico makes them, Laguna makes them, big ceramic store sells them. You can even go to your local pottery shop if you have one around you, and I'm pretty sure they'll have it as well. Number two, you're going to need a brush. The brush doesn't really matter. I like to use a fan brush. The one potter tip that I will give you is that if you use a brush for wax resist, make sure that this is your wax resist brush from now on. This cannot go on glaze and wax at the same time, or even if it has wax residue on it, it's gonna resist that glaze because it's filled with wax resist. Its job is kind of to resist glaze. So make sure that you have a brush that is solely dedicated to wax. Number two, you're gonna need at least 2 glazes. I'm gonna be teaching you how to separate glazes today with wax resist. So you need at least 2 glazes. One is here, one is down there. Don't worry about the colors, it's not important. You're gonna need a piece of bisque pottery because duh. The first thing we're gonna do is put glaze on the part of the pottery that we do not want disturbed. So for this first step, wherever you're gonna paint this pottery on, we're gonna be leaving that space alone after we put wax resist on. For example, this cup here is very similar to the cup that we're gonna be working on today, but you can probably tell that this already has some, where are you going? For example, this cup here is already glazed. You can very clearly see that there's already glaze up here on this spot. We don't want this color to change. Whatever I put on here, we're not gonna be mixing it with the secondary glaze. So I'm gonna just do this to this cup here. Now that we've glazed the parts that we only want this glaze to stay on, we're gonna get our bottle of wax resist, open that up, and get our wax resist brush. I have a little turntable for this part. You don't have to have one of these, but it will make your job a lot easier if you do. Now grab that cup and put a nice layer of wax resist right on the part where you glazed it. Only there. Make sure you don't go over this. Okay, I would say that's pretty good as far as the wax resist goes. There's 2 things you want to remember about wax resist. Number 1, it doesn't take a heavy coat in order to resist any glaze on there. This was probably like 1 to 1.5 coats. It's not very thick at all. Wax resist does a really good job at doing what it's supposed to do with minimal effort. And number 2, I would make sure to not go over the glaze line in which you've already glazed. I didn't go to the glaze line, but that's only because I don't really care if the 2 glazes that I'm mixing mix. I only need a certain part to separate them. But if you're one of those people that really badly want to get every single inch of this stuff to really mold in with the wax resist and really really separate from the glaze, it's gonna be really hard. And if any of this wax resist goes over the glaze line and ends up on the bisque part of your pottery, well, you're pretty much just gonna have a giant raw spot with no glaze on it whatsoever. So I would heavily suggest just giving it maybe a quarter or an eighth of an inch right up here to let it be by itself. I'd much rather just have the glazes mold together a tiny bit than to have a giant raw spot on my pottery. And the last part's pretty easy because all you have to do now is glaze the pot like you normally would. So for me, I'm just gonna dip this entire thing in this giant glaze of black here. But watch what happens when we put this cup that we just put wax resist on into this giant thing of glaze. It also becomes much easier to clean. Even if you don't get all of the glaze off from the wax resist, it still has a layer of wax in between the glaze and the actual wax resist you put on itself. So if you decide to wipe this stuff off, it just comes off super easy and it doesn't disturb the rest of the glaze. See? It doesn't actually get the glaze off. It just takes off the layer of glaze that was already on top of the wax resist. Truth be told, wax resist is one of those magical substances that make potters' lives way easier. It just creates a layer of wax in between the glaze and anything else, and makes our jobs a lot easier and a lot cleaner. You see, this took like a third of the effort that it usually would to wipe off all that glaze from the bottom of my feet if I didn't use wax resist. It doesn't exactly wax proof your stuff. All it does is resist. It still makes it way easier to clean up and separate glaze from another glaze if you decide to put another layer over it. And that's all there is to it to separating a glaze with wax resist. You pretty much put the glaze that you want down first, put wax over it, and then put another glaze of whatever you want on top of it. It just makes a very easy job of cleanup with that other glaze. Or 80% of the time, to be honest with you, because this is not that 80% of the time, if you're quite lucky or it works as it normally does, your glaze won't be as thick as my Ron Roy's High Gloss Black here, and you won't even have to do cleanup. It usually just kind of rolls off. But in the case that it doesn't roll off, it also makes cleanup extremely easy. Well, thank you. Oh, what? You want to see the end product? Okay, I guess. I mean, I do read the comments, and half of you are super frustrated that I never show you the end product of a technique, so let's put these in the kiln, and it'll be a nice reward for those of you who actually stayed till the end of the video.
A few moments later.
Alright, here you go, since I never show you guys the end products. You can now see what I'm talking about though, right? Like clearly this crystal glaze that I put on here versus the Ron Roy's High Gloss Black. I mean, it almost dripped. It almost dripped. I even have another glaze that I did over here off screen, and you can totally see, even though the glaze is runny and they melted together anyway, if these were two normal glazes, the wax resist technique probably would have completely separated them. And it still did a pretty good job at separating them right now, actually. This is a pretty valuable technique, seeing as the high majority of the time if you dip something, you can't really separate it all that much. You would usually have to dip the entire thing in a glaze and then be like, well, I guess there's no, like, unless I want to paint specifically this part here, there's no reason or way to do this, like with an actual paintbrush. But you know, this is much easier for people like me who like to dip their glazes inside of 5-gallon buckets. You can just glaze one part or glaze the entire thing if you want, put wax resist over a part that you don't want to change the color of the glaze, and then dip the entire thing again. That glaze will just fall right off. It's way easier, way better. You guys don't even care anymore, do you? You just want to see the crystal glaze, don't you? You know what? Stay to the end. I'll give you a good close-up, all right? Let's make a deal. Let's make it you stay to the end of the video after the end screen, and I'll give you like a nice close-up of the inside of the rim, all right? Shake on it. Leave a comment down below. We shake. Give me a hand. Shake on it. It's weird. Can't do it through YouTube, but we're doing it. Well, thank you, Dirty Potters, for joining me today. I know that this was kind of a shorter episode just because I wanted to show you guys how to separate stuff with wax resist. It's extremely easy. I know it seems like I'm reiterating a lot, but it really is as simple as just putting wax over the part that is already glazed so that if you glaze another color over that, they don't combine, and they don't combine in the glaze or the kiln when you do them. So thank you, Dirty Potters, for joining me today. Hopefully you guys have a fantastic day. If you'd like to see any of my actual artwork, the links are always down below. And yes, I will post a close-up of this cup. Every single time I show you guys an end product, you're like, give us a close. Look, just go to my Instagram. I post the stuff down below. There, all right? I'm sorry. I'm so sorry I did that to you. I love you so much. You're crystal. You're more valuable than the others, baby. I'm sorry. I'm not gonna treat you like those other pots. I'm gonna treat you special. But if you guys like to see any of my other artwork, the links are always down below for your beautiful Potter eyes to see. And we have the brand new podcast. I will link that down below as well. Hopefully you guys have yourself a fantastic week. Good luck on your next art projects, and I will see you, Dirty Potters, next week.